Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so the position that I have for you guys on the board here is the answer to the puzzle that I gave last upload, the last video I did, and like I told you guys before, it's a remove the defender type of tactic here, and so you know, something that I'm sure you guys probably noticed is that this bishop is doing a very good job of defending this king. And so, you know, it's holding down these pawns and it's not allowing the rook to really penetrate, or the queen or anything like that, right? So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to remove that defender. And so we're going to see rook takes g6. So, you know, whoever out there found, you know, not the entire line, but anybody that found rook to g6, you know, that's a very good eye for, you know, these type of tactics and stuff like that. And it's a little counterintuitive because, you know, you don't just naturally want to give up the rook for a bishop or a knight or something like that. So, you know, just going down the line, you know, that we would have here. So we'd see f takes g6. So we'd see rook to f7, sacrificing the entire rook. King takes f7, queen takes h7 with check. King would come to e6. We'd see queen takes g6 with check. King down to e5. And so we'd see a queen back to g7 with check. King would take e4, and we would see knight to f6 with check. Nice little family fork, you know, getting all the pieces involved here and checking the king. And so we'd have to take there, and after take we'd see queen takes d7. And so this isn't completely won, but it's a lot easier to win than it was before, especially sacrificing all that material. So like I said, if you found rook takes g6, I applaud you. You have a really good eye for these types of tactics. So going to the actual game, like I said, we have Wesley versus Magnus Carlsen, and it is the knockout finals of the Skilling Open. And interestingly enough, we had no draws. So all 4 games were won by either opponent, and that's the first time that's happened. That's pretty exciting. So, you know, they have 2 different sets of 4 games. So they have the first match, which is 4 games, the second match, and then if they need to, if it's still tied going into that, it'll be a Armageddon, you know, some blitz and Armageddon and stuff like that. So, like I said, this is the first match that they played with each other. And so, you know, if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is the 3rd game of that first encounter between them here. So. All right, so we have e4, and so we have c5. So we have a typical Sicilian here. All right, so we have knight to f3, and so we have knight to c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Just probably, you know, the most typical of the Sicilian. It's a Sicilian Open right now, and so you know, this is probably the most heavily played. These are probably the most heavily played moves initially into the Sicilian. Just a general opening of the Sicilian here. So we have knight to f6, knight to c3, and so we have e5. So we have the Pelican Lasker variation of the Sicilian Open here. And like, you know, just backing up here, you guys see that, you know, we have after knight to c3. I mean, there's a lot of options. I mean, there's a d6, there's an e6, there's an a6. You know, there's also, of course, a knight or backing up a little bit further, you know, without knight to c6 with knight to f6 first. But yeah, like I said, going forward. So we have knight d to b5. You know, a nice little threat of you know, checking the king on d6 here. So we cover that with d6. All right, so we have knight to d5, just you know, putting as much pressure as possible on this f7 square, or c7 square, excuse me. Of course, trying to win this rook in the corner. So we avoid that by knight takes d5, e takes d5, knocking that knight back to b8, and so we have queen to f3, and so we have a6. So a lot of the moves in this position here, I mean, you'll see are going to be like c4 or a4s. Just, you know, solidifying the pawn center and trying to make sure that we have this knight, you know, defended, because, you know, queen a5s might come and stuff like that. So like I said, we see queen to f3 and we see a6. Another variation that you can see after queen to f3, which is the most heavily played, is going to be bishop to e7. And then you might see something like bishop e2, and then only after that a6 would come. And you'll see in a second why bishop to e7 is kind of important to play. Because like I said, we do have queen to f3, and we have a6, And so we have queen to a3, you know, pinning the pawn to the rook here. And so we see b6 and bishop to d5. And like I said before, that's where that bishop to e7 move comes into play. Because, you know, if bishop e7 is played, then bishop to g5 is not an option. And so, you know, now we would see bishop to e7. And so we'd see, you know, we'd see bishop takes e7. And we'd actually see king takes e7. Now, just to back up a touch here, you know, when we do see bishop to g5, I mean, you definitely don't want to take with g5 because, I mean, of course, that's just going to drop the check here on c7 like I was talking about before. And so, like I said, you'll see bishop takes e7 and king takes e7. Now, it might be kind of curious to you, you know, why the king took, because, I mean, you're looking at it like, you know, it's you know, castles is coming up pretty soon, so it kind of seems like, you know, king takes on e7 kind of messes up your castling possibilities, and it does. But if we just go into the variation with queen takes e7, you'd see rook takes d6, king down to d7, and then knight would take on c8. And so, you know, the main problem that you have here is the fact that this queen is only defended by the king, but you've also snapped the piece off. And so, you know, you definitely couldn't see anything like queen to a3. Then you see, you know, knight coming back to, you know, knight coming back to b6 with check. And, you know, you're going to be picking this queen back up, you know, at some point. So it's definitely considerably better to take with the king here. And so we saw castles, queenside castles. And we see bishop to b7. And actually, castles here is the first time that this has been seen. And so, you know, normally, like I said, you'll see like a c4, maybe a king to b1, just kind of getting out of the way of any little tactics. Once this king is able to kind of get back in a better spot. But we do see bishop to b7, knight back down to c3. You know, most logical way to defend that pawn. All right, so we see knight to d7. So we got f4. And something that you guys notice about these games with Wesley So is, you know, just the fact that, you know, he knows very well, you know, when to kind of sacrifice a pawn, which ends up not really being a sacrifice. It's, you know, it's basically just a way to try to, you know, knock a pawn out of a way. And so, like I said, it's not really sacrificing a pawn. It's opening up some lines. So if you can open up some lines to somebody's king, especially with the fact that this king is dead stuck in the center of the board, it's a situation where, you know, you definitely don't want to take here with the pawn. All right, so we have queen to c7. All right, so pawn takes e5, knight takes e5. Got queen to b4, trying to get that queen into a nice little, you know, a more central area here, either, you know, e4 or, you know, coming over here, something like that. So we see h5, just trying to restrict the queen as much as possible, expand and get a little bit of space here. Since the king, like I said, is stuck in the center, you got to try to open lines for these rooks. All right, so we see bishop to e2. All right, we see king back to f8. All right, so rook h to f1. Like I was saying before, guys, you have to make sure that you put the correct rook, because, I mean, rook d can also come to f1. So make sure you're writing down the correct one here. All right, so we have rook to e8. All right, so rook to f5. All right, so we got h4. So rook back to f4, just throwing a little double attack on that pawn here. So queen to d8 defending. All right, so we have king to b1. All right, so rook to h6. All right, so rook d to d4. And so, you know, this pawn is looking kind of scrumptious. All right, so we see h3. So we got g3. All right, so bishop back to c8. All right, and we got a4. King to g8. You know, they're not really at the moment, but there might be some possible tactics with this pawn on d6. Mostly because of the fact that you have a light square bishop, so the light square bishop isn't able to defend this d6 pawn. And so, you know, you have the ability maybe, you know, move a knight here at some point and trying to add a lot of pressure onto that d6 pawn. So, you know, king g8 just sidesteps any tactics involved here. All right, so we have rook d to e4, queen to c7. All right, so rook to h4. All right, so we got a5, trying to knock the queen back, which actually in this particular situation, yes, you do have a light square bishop that does have influence on, let me get this, on this square. But you've actually been able to give white a really nice square for, you know, either a bishop or a knight to come in. And you'll see that'll be relevant here in a minute. And so rook takes h4. So we got rook takes h4, bishop to f5, and we have rook to h5. And so the bishop has kind of put itself in a kind of curious position here, because it's not really attacking anything, and it was more or less just kind of wasted a tempo putting itself on that square, and that was being attacked. And so, you know, you have queen to c8, which was played in the game, you know, which automatically drops the b5, the b6 pawn. But I mean, there wasn't really a lot that was better in this particular position. You know, if we just looked at the next best move after rook to h5, it would be let me see, rook to h5. It'd be bishop to d7. You know, just trying to maintain, you know, holding on to this pawn here on h3, and saving itself. But you know, you see knight to b5, really forcing the issue. And if you didn't want to trade the bishop for the knight, you might try to, you know, do something like, you know, moving queen back to b8, and then after g4, knight to g6, bishop to d3. You know, you see you have a lot of pressure, you know, on this h7 square. You know, basically what all black is doing is defending. You know, black's pieces are just pretty much tied down to the defense of, you know, the queen's tied down to here. You know, this knight's tied down to defend this square. The bishop is tied down to defending this square. I mean, the rook is movable, but, you know, you're just going to sidestep that with king to a2. So, you know, that's it's a really passive position to be in. But I mean, like we were saying, I mean, queen to c8 and, you know, queen takes b6 wasn't much better. I mean, you're going to have to give at some point. And so we have knight to g4. So bishop to a6, you know, trying to knock the queen away from the defense of this bishop, and also getting it out of the way so that there aren't any type of, you know, rook sacks. And so we see rook to e1 check, king to a2. And so we see queen to e8. And we just see just simple rook takes f5. And if we just kind of go back a touch here, if, you know, after king to a2, you know, if we had something like queen to d7, just trying to hold on to the bishop actually just falls anyway. So rook would take f5, queen would take f5 if you did want to try to take back. And you know, we see queen to d8 check, king to h7, and then bishop to d3 would just be outright winning the queen. And like I was showing you guys a second ago, you know, that's the exact reason, you know, why Magnus Carlsen just you know, he just gives up the bishop altogether, because he saw, you know, he saw this variation down, so he didn't want to go into any of that. So like I said, we have rook takes f5, knight to e3, we have bishop to b5, and we have queen to e7. And then it's in this position that Magnus Carlsen actually resigns the game. It's pretty obvious, you know, why somebody would resign in this position. I mean, if you do the pawn count, you know, white has 6 pawns, black only has 5, and he's also down an entire rook. So, I mean, positionally, he's down about 8 points, which is almost enough, almost as much as a queen. You know, and so there's just really not anything else for black to do here. So, like I said, Wesley So does win that third game in the 4-game series that they played in this match. And so, like I promised at the end of each video, I have another puzzle for you guys. And so this is the puzzle right here. And it also has to do with removing the defender. It's a pretty tough one. It's actually something that I don't remember ever looking at. And so, you know, it was when I saw the answer, I was like, wow, this is crazy. It's some really deep calculation involved in this one. So this is legitimately hard or whatever. So like I said, I mean, if you want to set this up on your own board at home, or, you know, if you want to, you know, if you want to put it on your, you know, chess engine, or your, you know, whatever tool you use for, you know, setting up chess positions and stuff, and see if you can figure it out. I'll be making another video here pretty soon. So you might have about 45 minutes or an hour before I post that next one and give you the answer. So I'm curious to see if anybody's able to come up with this move. But I appreciate you guys stopping by, and I'll see y'all in about an hour.